Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating shift in behavioral psychology. We're going to look at how to move your mindset away from that exhausting, endless cycle of constantly seeking approval and push it toward intentionally controlling your positioning. The goal here is to earn genuine respect. We'll be exploring some major structural upgrades in how you speak, how you respond, and how you actually design your reputation. And the best part, you can do all of this without ever needing to resort to aggression or hostility. So let's get right into it. Okay, let's jump straight in with a pretty heavy truth, and I just want you to take a strategic pause to really let this sink in. Most people don't lose because they lack intelligence. They lose because they're addicted to being liked. Now, being liked is comfortable, right? Biologically, it feels incredibly safe. Evolutionary psychology literally tells us that our ancestors needed tribal approval just to survive, which is why rejection registers in our brains as actual physical pain. But today, that survival instinct often masquerades as maturity, or just being a good team player. The vital distinction here is that being liked is absolutely not the same as being respected. And when you confuse those two, you quietly hand over control of your life to people who are simply playing a more strategic game than you are. Think about the internal flaws of default niceness for a second. The typical nice person is constantly working overtime to smooth things out. You know the type, maybe it's even you, the person who starts every single email with, "Sorry to bother you," or apologizes literally just for taking up space in a room. They adjust their tone so no one ever feels even an ounce of friction. But honestly, that's often just a fear of disapproval disguised as morality. A strategic person, on the other hand, they don't panic when their heart rate spikes over something slightly awkward. They observe the tension. They allow the silence. They actually let the discomfort do the heavy lifting for them. They don't run from tension at all. They learn exactly how to control it. I want to break the fourth wall here for a second and ask you directly, who is actually benefiting from your niceness? Are you benefiting? Or are you just handing the reins over to people who push your boundaries, test your limits, and quietly take full advantage of your predictable behavior? Because here's the thing, while your predictability is a great warm blanket of comfort to everyone else, a dash of unpredictability creates caution. And caution is the absolute foundation of respect. If people know exactly how far they can push you before you fold, well, they're going to push you exactly that far every single time. So this brings us to redefining what psychological safety actually looks like in practice. We really need to learn how to tolerate discomfort. In modern culture, we usually think of psychological safety as this purely positive thing, a space where everybody feels completely supported. But what often happens is that it devolves into a silent addiction to keeping conversations perfectly smooth. It basically becomes a really convenient, socially acceptable code word for avoiding risk, where you end up prioritizing your own emotional comfort over your strategic advantage. It's kind of like putting training wheels on a sports car. Sure, you absolutely won't tip over, but you are completely neutralizing all your power and speed. And when you prioritize that comfort above all else, you inevitably train yourself to shrink. You start softening truths that desperately need clarity. You start adding the word just to all your sentences. I just think maybe we should. You hesitate on your boundaries, and you constantly lower your own status by overcompensating the second a conversation gets awkward. But here is the hard truth. True power sits on the exact opposite side of unease. Rushing to relieve friction, whether that's by laughing nervously or diluting your firm stance, it just keeps you agreeable. It definitely doesn't make you respected or authoritative. So how do we actually fix this in real time? Well, it requires building a mental toolkit that shifts you from an impulsive reaction to a calculated delay. When someone challenges you, an instant reaction almost always reveals impulsiveness. It puts your emotional triggers on full display for the whole room to see. Instead, you've got to give yourself the space to assess their tone and their intention. Just pause. By simply pausing, you effortlessly shift that psychological pressure outward. You're letting the silence act as a heavy mirror for the other person to look into. That calm timing actively reinforces your composure, signaling to everyone that you are anchored and you are not easily moved. When you finally detach from that deep need for immediate approval, your entire posture changes. Craving instant validation makes you a social chameleon. You become adjustable, compromised, constantly tailoring your opinions and your laughs just to match the temperature of the room. But when you prioritize long-term positioning, you build actual authority. You become an unshakable mountain. It means you can tolerate the short-term friction of being misunderstood or even disliked for a minute. You stop frantically scanning people's faces for reassurance, and you start operating from a place of solid internal alignment. By introducing silence and letting moments breathe, you reclaim your authority. You disrupt the predictable patterns that people are so used to using to influence you. Remember this core philosophy: tempo is power, period. The one who controls timing controls direction. The vast majority of people operate on pure reflex. They answer texts instantly, they defend themselves against criticism instantly, they rush to fill awkward silences instantly. But when you are the one deciding when an interaction moves forward, you shape its entire structure. You're no longer just playing defense and reacting to the world, you are the one directing the rhythm. And this control over your timing naturally extends right into our next transformation: redefining kindness. We have to shift kindness from being an automatic, knee-jerk reflex into a scarce, conditional asset. Society loves to romanticize the idea that generosity should be absolutely unlimited and given unconditionally to everyone. But high-level operators, they practice selective kindness. They distribute their support, their empathy, and their resources based on actual alignment and contribution. It's really about rigorously evaluating where your energy goes, and more importantly, why you are giving it away in the first place. Because when you just leave the tap running, constantly accommodating everyone regardless of how they behave, the consequences are actually pretty severe. You erase natural hierarchies, you remove consequences for poor behavior, and you completely destroy your own perceived worth. Think about it like basic economics. If your time and your support are just flooded into the market, available to anyone at any moment without any barrier to entry, they lose all their scarcity. People stop treating your support as a highly valuable resource that needs to be earned, and they start expecting it as a fundamental, bottomless right. So let's lock in a new baseline right now. Say it to yourself: my energy is earned. By actively treating your time, your attention, and your resources as premium assets rather than baseline obligations, you fundamentally change the dynamic of every single relationship in your life. Unlimited kindness creates comfort for others, sure, but selective kindness creates structure. And structure is what builds immense authority. The very moment people realize your support is something they actually have to earn through mutual respect, their entire approach towards you is going to shift. Now let's zoom out to a macro-level strategy. Think about the power of embracing mystery instead of rushing to wrap up every single conversation with a neat, over-explained little bow. Most of us are deeply, deeply uncomfortable with unfinished business. Think about that agonizing urge to send 3 rapid-fire follow-up texts just to clarify what you meant, purely because someone didn't reply right away. Rushing for closure exposes a really raw, emotional need to be understood. But withholding that closure, that creates psychological gravity. The other person continues thinking about the interaction long after it ends. You really don't always have to relieve their discomfort by endlessly explaining yourself. Think about this. What happens if you are consistently investing more explanation, more enthusiasm, and more reassurance than the other person? Just let that question hang in the air for a moment. It forces us to evaluate every single interaction as an actual exchange of power and influence. Conversations are rarely neutral ground, right? They subtly adjust the hierarchy in a room based entirely on the distribution of effort. If you are the one constantly adapting to maintain harmony or working twice as hard to keep a completely dull exchange flowing, you are slowly, quietly positioning yourself beneath them. Because ultimately, effort imbalance creates perception imbalance. Power isn't usually loud or boisterous. It's meticulously measured. The person who manages their conversational energy wisely, slowly but surely becomes the reference point in the room. If someone is dominating the airtime, you reduce yours, which naturally makes your words carry way more weight. If someone interrupts you, you don't raise your voice to compete with them, you just maintain deadpan eye contact and keep speaking calmly. When you start seeing your daily interactions as strategic terrain, you completely stop giving away your influence by accident. All of these tactics lead us to one final, absolutely crucial realization. You have to intentionally design your reputation. You can't just passively hope people interpret your good intentions correctly. Because if you don't actively define how you are perceived, trust me, others will gladly do it for you. You have to decide what psychological effect you want to create the literal second you enter a space. And managing your image isn't about adopting some fake persona or being manipulative. It's just about controlled, deliberate signaling that protects your boundaries and projects your actual, genuine value. The really fascinating thing about reputation is how it compounds over time. It steadily lowers your daily friction and increases your influence without you having to put in any extra effort. It all starts on day one with your initial reaction under pressure. When you repeat that, say you offer a disciplined, measured response rather than an emotional outburst, by day 30, it establishes genuine consistency. By year 1, that consistency turns into anticipated standards. People actually begin adjusting their behavior before you even speak. They calculate their actions based entirely on the formidable, predictable reputation that you have built. So let's bring this all together. Think about the massive shift from being just a nice survivor to becoming a smart positioner. The survivor is out there just trying to get through the day by seeking comfort, handing out automatic generosity, and letting their image happen completely by accident. We are leaving that completely behind. Becoming a smart positioner means you're operating strategically. It means cultivating absolute discipline in your speech, your timing, and your energy. It requires embracing tension tolerance, making highly intentional investments in others, and engineering your reputation with a clear, undeniable purpose. I'm going to leave you with one final, pretty provocative thought to chew on. If someone described you in 3 words today, what would they say? And more importantly, is that description actually aligned with the authority you want? Nothing we've discussed today requires you to become someone you're not, and it certainly doesn't require hostility. It just requires intention. If you need to make adjustments to your positioning, those adjustments begin right now. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.